So this is our next topic, and this is called this is the topic 4, auto scaling in cloud computing. So when you have a server that is serving like 4 people, 10 people, 100 people, or 200 people, every server has their limited capacity. So when a server reaches its limited or its max capacity, it will start malfunctioning, either going extremely too slow or responding so late, or it might even crash. So this is the reason why when a server is running, you want to be monitoring the server to make sure that it is not overperforming or overused. And at the same time, you also want to make sure that your server are not being underused. So in order to solve the issue of overuse or underuse, you need to provision more server when a server is overused, or increase the capacity of the server, or reduce the servers or the capacity of the servers if it is being underused, because you want to save costs. So this is called scaling or scalability. And this is one of the challenge that we have on cloud, on-prem, on traditional data center. When you are expecting, like maybe you are thinking or expecting your user or customer base to increase because of an oncoming event. Then on the traditional data center, for that purpose, you might have to go and buy multiple servers or increase the capacity of the existing server so that you can attend, or you can serve all the customers that will be accessing your application or your website. But after the event or after the peak period, then all the servers that you bought, then they will just be there doing nothing. So guess what? You need to reduce them so that you are saving costs. But in a traditional data center, the only option for us is to just turn it off, because we don't want to sell them. If we sell them, we still need to buy them when the peak period come back. So you need to turn them off, but despite that, they're still consuming some money. But in the cloud, you can actually remember, we can create server on the go. When currently, let's say we are using one server to serve 200 users. When the 200 user increase to 400, all we just need to do is either we increase this server to a bigger capacity, or we create an additional server to serve our 300 users. So 200 people will be using this and 100 people will be using this. So this is what is just called scalability. But how do scalability works in the cloud? And that is what we are going to be discussing today. So remember, this is our coffee website, the one that we deployed. Let's assume that currently this website is deployed on this server. Let's say this is the server that we use. Remember, we have a server, then we deploy our website on the server. So let's assume that this is the web server that is serving, this is the web server that is hosting these coffee sites. And the users are just maybe very few. Let's say currently we have 200 users that are accessing our website. It might be more than 200. Okay, let's just use 2,000 people accessing our website now. So this server that we have here is enough. It's serving them good. When they make a request, it responds immediately, because it's a good capacity for 2,000 users. Excuse me. But what is going to happen if our user base increase from 2,000 to 100,000? because of maybe festival, or maybe there's an event, holiday period that is coming, then our user increase significantly. So that way, let's say this is what is happening now. We have our user base has increased significantly. So hosting that same or providing a service, our web service, using exactly the same server that we only use for 2,000 people to serve 100,000 people now is not going to be visible. So if 100,000 people are visiting our website that is being hosted on the same site that we initially created for just 2,000 people, then the website will break. That is the situation whereby when you access some website, maybe there's a promo going on and a lot of people jump on the same website at the same time. That is why the website will like, oh, the website has crashed, because the current server or the current infrastructure is not built for the capacity that is accessing the server currently. So there are multiple means of getting out of this. Or the first one is we need to increase the capacity of the server. From that very small server, we can increase it to a very large one so that it can accommodate the total number or the increase in user base. But this is okay, but this is not all. So this takes us to different types of scalability that we have. There is something called horizontal scalability, and we have vertical scalability. When we talk about horizontal scalability, that is when the current server that you have, let's say you have one server, then the user base increase. What are we going to do? We add more servers. This is when you add more servers or node to a system to handle increasing workload. If user base increased from 2,000 to 100,000, we had another additional server. If it increased more, we had additional server. So this is what is called horizontal. You can see it's going horizontally. It's called horizontal scaling. And it's also referred to scaling out. You're scaling out, or when the user base started decreasing, maybe, oh, the holiday period or the event has ended, then the servers that we created to accommodate the increase in workload, then we don't need that number of servers again, because you always have what is called a returning customers. Those are your trusted customers. They can't buy from anywhere but yours, but from your website. So those people, let's say those people are just 2,000. But because maybe you have a promo, or because of the festive period or an event, a lot of people come to your website and to buy, maybe first-time buyer. And after that, after they finish buying, maybe the festive period has gone, then the only people that is left are your regular customer. So your regular customer, one server is enough for them. So you need to remove all these additional servers that you created to go back to one server. So this is called scaling in. We have scaling out when you add more server, and scaling in when you reduce server to accommodate, to meet up with the current capacity. Then another one is the vertical scaling. And this is when you add more power to existing machine. Maybe currently the machine is running on 2 vCPU. You can increase that 2 vCPU to like 4 vCPU or 6 vCPU. This is mean you have the current server that is serving 200 people, and when the user base increase, you just increase the capacity. You don't add additional server, but you increase the capacity of an existing server, and this is called scaling up. or when the number decrease, you can scale down back to the normal server. Which of them is the best? Well, there is no best option. Both of them have different use cases. When you are talking about server, maybe web server, application server, then you can think of scalability as the best option. But when you are talking about database, then when you're talking about web server, horizontal scaling is the best option. But when you are talking about database, you might think, or you might go for vertical scaling, because if you have, let's say you have multiple server for your database, you have server 1, server 2 for your database. Then if a user wants to save something in the database, where is he going to save it? He can save it here. But when the same user wants to request for the database data, what if it goes to this server? So it's going to be more complex. So the best option, you might go for vertical scaling when it comes to database. But both of them are good and they have different use case. So in AWS, AWS provide what is called Amazon EC2 auto scaling, which help you to automate the scalability. So you don't have to do this manually, like, festive period is coming, then you go and start buying your own laptop, or you go and start configuring, you're spinning up multiple EC2 instances. You don't have to do that, though you can do it manually, but you can actually give that service to AWS auto scaling to do. So with AWS auto scaling, it automatically scales the resources for you, and it is better for fault tolerance, so that if there is anything that happened to one application or one server, it will automatically create another server for you, so you don't have to be there. You can also use it for, it's also good for to ensure high availability of your application. For example, the example that we talked about earlier, from 2,000 customers, if you automatically jump to 100,000, what if you don't have the time to prepare? Or you don't even know, you just wake up one day and maybe somebody just accidentally shoots a movie close to your office, or they just accidentally market you. You know how video go viral, and before you know, thousands of people has jumped on your website and they start buying from there. So that in that case, you don't have like heads up, or you don't have any first-hand information that your website is going to go viral. But in that case, you cannot just start creating EC2 to accommodate for the increased number of users. You want the system to automatically take control. So with the AWS auto scaling, immediately the number of users is increasing, is creating more servers for you. And when the number of users decrease, it also reduces the server automatically for you. So it's better for cost management. You don't have to do all of this. So, and you only pay for the resources you use, because the auto scaling is helping you to scale up or scale down. When you want to configure auto scaling, there are some things that you need to consider. Remember, if auto scaling needs to, let's say you have one server, and this server is running our coffee application. If auto scaling need to create multiple servers for you, then if you just create a server, what happens to our application? Or how would the auto scaling know the instance type that it will use to create? How will it know the key pair? How will it know the security group? You can provide all of this information for your auto scaling group, or for your auto scaling, with the help of launch configuration. The long configuration is just like a template whereby you put all those information that you want the auto scaling to use to scale up or scale down your resources. You inside the launch configuration, you can tell it which region it should use, which subnet or availability zone, which key pair, which instance type, and so on. So anytime it's spinning up a server for you or removing a server, is using this information, is getting its information from the configuration, from the launch configuration. So a launch configuration is a template that an auto-scaling group used to launch EC2. Another thing that you need to consider, apart from the information that you provide to auto-scaling group or the launch configuration or the templates, you also need to tell auto-scaling group how much or how many instances it should create. Because if you just give auto-scaling group, let's look at this scenario. Currently, you have 2,000 customers that are accessing your server. And you tell auto-scaling group, let me just use this as auto-scaling group. Let's just say this auto-scaling group. And you tell it that, hey, when this user, which is 2,000, when they increase to 100,000, spin up another server for me. So instead of using one server, you tell him to spin up 2 servers. Or you do not even provide him, just tell him, we just give him the instruction. When the user increase, provide more server. So how would auto-scaling group know how many servers to create? What happened or what will happen if your user increase from 100 to 1 billion? Then that means auto-scaling group will just continue creating server for you. We just continue creating server. What if these users are not legitimate user? What if they are bot? Meaning that an hacker has hacked your system, or it has hacked one person's system or multiple people's systems, and is using those systems to interact with your server. So your auto-scaling group just continue creating server thinking that it's legitimate user. And meanwhile, it's just an hacker. So what is going to happen? You're going to end up with $100,000 bill, whereby these are not legitimate users. So for that not to occur, we also need to limit the numbers of resources that auto-scaling group can create. So the way to specify the number of resources that an auto-scaling can create is that you need 3 things. The first one is desired capacity. The desired capacity is when the auto-scaling group starts, immediately you configure the auto-scaling group, it's going to spin up the whatever number of instances that you specify as the desired capacity. Let's say you spin up the auto-scaling group now. Let's say this is the auto-scaling group. Immediately you spin it up. If you specify the desired capacity to be 4, it's going to spin up 4 instances for you. It will spin up 4 instances for you immediately. It will not consider what you currently have running. Let's say you already have, maybe by default, you already by yourself have spin up 2 before, and you specify the desired capacity to be 4, it's going to spin up 4. So the total number of instances that you're going to have is going to be 6 running at the same time. And it will not take these 2 into consideration. It will just create 4 for you because that is what we specify as desired capacity. Then there is what is called minimum capacity. The minimum capacity is when nobody is using your server. This is what the auto-scaling group should remain. Because if auto-scaling group spin up 6 servers for you and is managing 6 servers for you, if your user base increase from 1 million to 200, it's going to start terminating all these instances. So you don't want it. If you want at any point in time that you must have 2 servers running because of high availability, then you might tell the auto-scaling group that, hey, no matter what, make sure that you do not have lesser than 2 servers. Even if the 200 people, 1 server is enough, I mean, the 2,000 people, 1 server is enough for them, it will still leave 2 servers because that is what you specify in your minimum. So with the minimum now, you can now be assured that you have highly available environments. So this represents the minimum group size that cannot decrease the group desired capacity below. That means the auto-scaling cannot decrease the group desired capacity below the minimum capacity. And the last one is the maximum capacity. So the initial example that I gave earlier about the hacker that has hacked into our system and starts interacting with our system, and the auto-scaling group just starts continuing creating servers. Once the server reach your maximum capacity, no matter how many users on your application, it will not create more than the desired capacity. So if your desired capacity is just 5, then it can't create more than 5. Even let the user on your account or the user that are accessing your website, even if they like, they should increase to 1 trillion. If they like, they should increase to 1 trillion. It will not create more than 5. So those are the things that you have to tell the auto scaling before you even start using them. So when we talk about auto scaling, there are other things that you need to study the auto scaling, like, okay, when should it take action, or when do you want to auto scale? So, and Amazon EC2 auto scaling provides several ways for you to scale your auto scaling group. You can scale manually, meaning that you can just go to the system and increase the size by yourself, or trigger the auto scaling group like, hey, create one more. This is when you manually update the desired capacity of your auto scaling group, and they manually update the instance that are attached to the auto scaling group, such as the instance type. That means when you manually do it, you go to the auto scaling group and you do the configuration yourself. There are another means whereby you can tell the auto scaling group like, hey, to be in a predictive mode, meaning that it will predict. Let's say you have you have a company or your website, the one that we created. Let's say you have noticed that every Monday morning, there are a lot of users buying coffee from your website on Monday morning. But on Saturday, you hardly have 2 users buying from your website. So what is going to happen? You can configure the auto scaling group based on the time function. You can tell the auto scaling group like, hey, every Monday morning, spin up 6 servers. Every Monday morning, spin up 6 servers. But once it is Monday evening, nobody buy coffees again in the evening, then reduce the server to 1. And also on Sunday, reduce the server to 1. But every Monday morning, maybe between the hours of 6 a.m. to like 11 a.m., always run 6 servers. That is predictive scaling. That is not all. We have the dynamic scaling. And this is when the auto scaling group will just start creating resources for you based on the users that are currently using your application. Maybe currently you have 5 users, and immediately from 5 users, you jump to 200 users. Then it go into the action that is dynamic. And this is based on demand. And we have the proactive. That is, it's just like being in a proactive way. You know that, okay, on Monday, there is an holiday on Monday. So a lot of people will not going to buy coffee, but on Tuesday or on Tuesday, there is going to be a festival in the country. Then it will not wait for that times to come. It will be in a proactive way, ready to go. Just create the server, knowing that, okay, people will start using it. So let's go to the system to create our first auto scaling group.